Telling my story in public puts me in a state of vulnerability. I feel quite exposed telling you my personal details. But when I look at my life in a poem, I feel like I can hide behind it. She wanted to scream and run and tell, but did it instead. She yelled in silence and died in silence, and a little girl's innocence was taken with violence and muted, and she thought she liked it. She thought she must have, for she didn't fight it, or so it seems. Maybe she invited it. But what I have learned is that I shouldn't hide. I have to be authentic. And so here I am, showing up as I am, trembling on the inside, but I'm going to be tough on the outside. I was lost. I grew up in Washington, D.C., a few blocks from the Capitol, in a very underprivileged, impoverished, basically forgotten neighborhood with limited resources. Now, I'm not talking about Capitol Hill today, where you have tapas bars and nice rooftop parties, karaoke's, and the co-mingling of cultures and such. I'm talking about the late 80s. This is where crack was brand new and heroin was a big deal. Hip-hop was huge and everybody wanted to be a rapper, including me. I think my name was Miko the Magnificent, but don't quote me on that. At one time, there were 6 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment. One day, I remember looking out the window, and I saw my mother on the street. I didn't think that she saw me because I always felt forgotten. She was buying drugs from a dealer. And just then, when she looked up and saw me in the window, the look on her face surprised me. It was that of pure, oh my God, my daughter saw me doing this. To this day, I remember that look because it helped. It helped me. It helped shape how I thought of her, because whatever took a hold of her was not something that she asked for. It was something that even she could not control. I never held her accountable for that. I always just looked at it as sickness. I knew that she wanted help with it, but I was maybe 10 or 11 at the time, so I couldn't help. My father was also a drug addict. His habit led him to prison, where he lived on and off for about 30 years of my life. During that time, I admit, I had no idea what my future held for me. While I was a great student, I lacked the resources to see anything beyond my zip code. At that time, there were heroin addicts on street corners and crack addicts in prostitution houses. Over half of my DNA was on crack. I remember thinking that I didn't know if I was going to succumb to being a drug addict or to being just another statistic. My mother wanted me to be taken care of, and she did her best by giving me to my grandmother. She wanted to make sure that I didn't end up in the system. And my parents loved me fervently. Unfortunately, the high they got from the addiction made me feel like they loved drugs a little more than me. When I was 14 years old, I thought I was going to die. I ended up in my friend's bathroom, hunched over on the floor, bleeding out. I thought I was dying. My grandmother came and she said, "You're pregnant." She was calm, but very angry. I had to tell her, it was your son, my uncle. I honestly cannot remember what she said, but the look on her face was one I had never seen before. They rushed me to the hospital, and I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and we were very religious. That meant we couldn't take blood. I recall hearing the doctor saying to my grandmother, "Ma'am, if you don't give her blood, she's going to die." My grandmother said, "She's willing to die for this." And I guess on some level, I thought maybe I was. My innocence was lost. I couldn't tell if she was angry at me for losing my virginity or if she was angry at herself for what her son had done. My grandmother was everything to me. I wanted so badly to tell her that I didn't just lose my virginity on purpose, but those were the 80s. So that conversation was never spoken between us. I was a child and she was an adult. The end. But baby girl, she was so young and frail, only 14, with dreams that bled through her eyes as she cried and stained her face and drenched her mind with experience that typically takes a lifetime. And this must be a sign of the time because her daddy was gone and her mommy was gone and she was left all alone with the old lady who loved her, but the Bible was always right and only sinners hate, and the old lady quoted scriptures in hopes the baby girl could relate. But it was too late. She'd gone astray and begun to play with little boys and miscarried the child that uncle had given in jest or incest, but nevertheless, she chose to digress. My uncle was never punished for what he did to me. When I was in my 20s, I found out that he was incarcerated for raping another woman some years later. At first, this made me feel vindicated. Then I became overwhelmed with emotions. I'd wished that what he did to me would have been enough to put him in jail. I felt invisible. I felt as if my pain had never been real enough to warrant accountability. I had so much rage for him, my family, the system, and there was guilt too, and shame that constantly whispered, if only I had screamed louder, done more, maybe I wouldn't have been hurt. But more than anything, there was grief. I started to grieve the girl that I used to be, grieving all of the years that I carried that trauma alone, and for the fact that justice, when it finally came, wasn't mine. As I was nearing my high school graduation, I recall an Army recruiter visiting a school about twice a week during lunchtime. He asked me what my goals were after high school, and I recall telling him that I planned to work at McDonald's until the Lord came. He chuckled and said, "You'll certainly be needing my card." I took it, read his name, Sergeant White. I stuffed it in my book bag. A year later, when college became financially impossible for me to deal with on my own, I called Sergeant White and spent the winter of '94 in basic training. I was 19 years old when I was tasked with assisting my first sergeant on a medical supply mission. We were riding in a noisy camouflage Humvee truck. As we went over the grassy knolls in southern Georgia, I remember the bumps making my ponytail bounce from side to side. The first sharp turn he took almost made me fall out of my seat. I giggled nervously and looked over at him. He told me he's going the back way and that we would be there soon. He smiled and said I'd be okay. Had me check my seatbelt again for safety. His blue eyes seemed warm at that time. When we took another turn, I realized that we weren't on the way to the supply department. We took one more turn, and we were in the middle of an empty field. I said, "This isn't where the supplies are, First Sergeant." I looked over at him and saw his eyes had turned into ice. I tugged on my physical training uniform shorts, trying to make them cover more of my legs. I slid closer to the door. I asked again, "Where is the supply closet, First Sergeant?" He got out of the car and slammed it shut. "Private Reed, get out of the truck." I'd remembered this feeling from 5 years prior. This was death knocking again. I stayed in the truck with my seatbelt on. He reached his arms inside and unclicked my seatbelt, opened the door, and pulled me out of the truck. As he pinned my arms against the side of the Humvee door, I could see his ice blue eyes get darker. I felt betrayed again. I joined the Army to get away from the pain of childhood and ended up creating more traumatic experiences. I wanted to die. No one is going to believe a private with less than a year under her belt, were the last words I heard him say. I don't recall the ride back to the barracks, only the first sergeant telling me to shut up and not to say a word. When we pulled up to the barracks, I could see the female soldiers from the window. The first sergeant ordered me to clean myself up, just like when I was 14, as if I did something dirty, as if I caused this assault to happen. I could tell the other soldiers were waiting for me to return. I still remember their excitement when I walked in. We were all planning to wear pretty dresses. I'd made sure I packed one for each of my friends, and when I walked in, they were wearing them. This was our first time wearing civilian clothes together, and we wanted to look our best for our end of training awards party, honoring none other than the first sergeant. I walked in the door and went straight to the showers. I turned it on and sat under it with my PT uniform still on. They started calling my name, and I answered between muffled sobs. I said, "The supply room was dirty, and I need to scrub the mess off of me." I sat there for what felt like an hour. People came in and out, but I wouldn't budge. Eventually, the base sergeant came and sent everyone on their way. She got in the shower with me and held me tight. My tears melted away with the water, and I cried for my past, present, and my unknown future. The sergeant assured me that I would be okay. She rubbed my back, looked at me with tears in her eyes, and said, "Private Reed, no one is going to believe a new soldier with less than a year under her belt." I stared in disbelief. My heart was broken twice that day. She pulled me tighter with the gentleness of a mother and said, "You cannot report this. You have to suck this up. You have to be tough. You have to be strong. This is just the beginning of your Army career. She continued to rub my back. Pain is weakness leaving the body, Reed. I beg you, don't report this. Don't say anything. No one is going to believe you. You have to toughen up. Those are the things that will get you far in this Army life. She covered her frowns with smiles, sashayed around town, confusing sex with love, giving her love for sex obscuring gray lines. 30-year-old men lied and took over her mind, promised her love for sex vexed. Why didn't they see her pain? Sex for love vexed. Visions of her uncle seeped through her veins as she dropped the knife and decided not to take her life this time. I was still in uniform when everything changed. I stopped going to military drills. My once burgeoning, stellar career was a wash. I didn't care about anything. I requested to leave the unit 5 times. Each time I saw that sergeant, she gave me a kind but stern, remember what I said, look, then smiled and told me I was doing a fine job. I was living in a dream. I felt hopeless and helpless, but continued the journey. I was thriving on the outside, but fighting a mental battle daily on the inside. Each time my battle buddies came around, I'd have a smile on my face, with gnawing thoughts of shame inside of me. I was easygoing, the good girl. I gratified them. I started to believe that it was my goal in life to please others. That was the only time that I could see myself being safe, by making sure others always got what they wanted. That was my takeaway. My darkest times came during my solo hours, after PT, after clinicals, after training. Many times I thought I was having a heart attack. Later I found out it was panic attacks. I told no one. I went to the base doctor and was diagnosed with adjustment disorder. I had no idea what that was or how one even gets it. They said most young soldiers have it, described it as the period between civilian life ending and the military life beginning. I just knew that no matter what I accomplished, it felt unreal, like an outer body experience. Imposter syndrome became my status quo. What people saw was not who I felt I was. I recall the drill sergeant saying, "You have a fairy godmother looking out for you, Private Reed. We've decided to recycle you. I don't know what's going on, but you better get your head in the game." I was 22 years old when I graduated Army EMT and licensed practical nurse course and got promoted to a United States Army sergeant. I put all of the pain of the prior years behind me. That was the beginning of hope. When I was on the way back to my hometown, I got into a horrible car accident. My car hit a tree and flipped over several times. Firefighters thought I was dead. I broke about 7 bones on the left side of my body. The pain was beyond excruciating. That was my first taste of prescription drugs, Vicodin to be exact. Pain is weakness leaving the body, so I sucked it up, mentally and physically. A year later, I sat for the state nursing board exam. I accepted a job working in a long-term healthcare facility. I made the Army Reserve physical fitness team, and I had my own apartment. I also found out that our 2-week summer training session would be in none other than good old Southern Georgia. I went into the bathroom and felt my palms soaking into each other. I vomited in the stalls and blamed it on lunch from earlier that day. The next day at work, I was counting leftover pain pills of discharged patients. This was my second introduction to Vicodin. I decided to take just one to numb the pain. It made me fly. Each day I took one, then another, then maybe a different brand, a different type. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living like this forever. That's what I told myself when I took pain pills. I used prescription pills like armor. I was in pain. I was the perfect, pleasant girl that aimed to please everyone. It took me years to see that I wasn't healing. I was hiding. Eventually, I took one too many Vicodin and found myself explaining my unintentional suicide attempt to the psychiatrist at Walter Reed. I agreed to stay in counseling, and since I was a new nurse, I was given grace. I talked to the psychiatrist about my childhood sexual assaults, but never uttered a word about the second one. I sucked it up and went on with my life.
Guess we're alone. Got no one else to rely on. I can't do this on my own. Why does no one listen to a gone? I know I'm just another brick in the wall. Just another stone in the path. Just another person in the room. Just a piece of rubble in the ruin. Drink until you pass out. Smoke until you scream. Why not? Peace is only dreaming. Maybe when the day comes, maybe you'll be sober. So pop another pill now. Wait until it's over. Someone get me out of the hell I've created. Oh, someone get me out of the prison in my mind. Oh, someone get me out of the hell I created. Or I pop another, pop another, pop another, pop another.
Years went by and time, it took its toll on baby girl and reversed her mind. Though she was grown, she yearned for nurture, that special place at home. Grown, left to deal with this confusion alone. Grown in a 20-year-old body with a 14-year-old mind. Oxymoronic for her at that 20-year-old time. Grown with the same fears of a child. Why didn't they rescue her? Why'd they let her run wild, baby girl? Once pure, unsure, slightly obscure, slowly dying with smiles. Uncle loved, killed her cold. Daddy promised, sold his soul. Mommy cried, her story untold. Grandma's old, the Bible's gold, and Pandora's box was open. Stolen, snatched, detached, stripped, ripped, and baby girl, she angry that she could never get a grip of this unnatural ancestral shit that society dismisses as dysfunctional family affairs. How could they even dare? Let me reiterate. She, angry that she could never get a grip of this unnatural ancestral shit that society dismisses as just dysfunctional family affairs. How could they even dare begin to bear baby girl's forced affair? I started talking with a therapist again, only recounting the first assault. She told me that I had PTSD and referred me to the DC Rape Crisis Center. I started to attend deep group sessions and begun to see myself more as a woman healing instead of a broken soldier. During my time there, I decided to volunteer in the crisis call center. I still took the occasional pain pill. I never really saw myself as having an addiction. I was functional, smiling, and I always showed up for work. One morning, I woke up and opened my pill cabinet. No one worried about me because I flew under the radar. I was the funny good girl. It wasn't until I couldn't remember the last conversation I had without being medicated that I decided I had to do something else. I was around 25 years old when I finally broke up with Vicodin and started a new relationship with my pen. The real turning point for me wasn't when I stopped taking pills. It was when I finally asked myself, what and why am I so afraid to feel? That's the question I ask you today. Not because it's an easy task, but because it might save your life. The recovery, the meditation, the therapy, the art, the rediscovery of self, the joy and the journey of being whole again. That is the real hard work. When I realized I could do the hard work and still show up and be valued as the woman and soldier that I was, that is when I started to see a change. Because baby girl, she was so young and frail, only 14, with dreams that bled through her eyes as she cried and stained her face and drenched her mind with experience that typically takes a lifetime. This must be a sign of the times, baby girl. If you're still in that murky fog, trust me, I get it. Pills can truly feel like peace, but that type of peace can also still your voice. You deserve more than silence. You deserve to feel whole again. Not perfect, just whole. Every day I rise and I become a better version of myself. And if you're ready to rise too, nothing and no one will ever stop you.